Today is Genesis 10, 13 and 14. Genesis 10, 13, 14. And Mizraim fathered the Ludim and Anamim and Lechabim and Nephtahim and Pathrusim and Kasluhim, from whom the Philistine came, and Kaftarim. Mizraim fathered the Ludim, Anamim, Lechabim, and Naphtahim, and the Kaftarim symbolizes these individual nations, which in turn symbolize individual types of ritual. Mizraim means secular learning. The Ludim. Ludem Ludim. Anamim, Lechabim, and Naphtahim. 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 Naphtahim means respective types of ritual which are merely secular. The Pathrusim and Kasluhim mean nations by these names, and they symbolize doctrinal positions regarding ritual which came from the same origin and are themselves merely secular. From whom the Philistine came means the nation that grew out of this tradition, which in turn symbolizes a knowledge of the concepts involved in faith and charity. The fact that they came from the Kasluhim means that with them religious knowledge exists in the form of facts. Mizraim fathered the Ludim, Anamim, Lechabim, and Naphtahim, and the Kaftarim symbolizes these individual nations, which in turn symbolize individual types of ritual, as was established by evidence about at verse 6 of the present chapter concerning Mizraim, that is Egypt. The information there shows that Egypt symbolizes learning of actual knowledge. Those he is depicted as fathering can be nothing else, nothing but different kinds of ritual, and in fact, different kinds of ritual used in an outward show of worship. Being in its heart, in its inner meaning, the Lord's word never concerns itself with any other issues than ones that have to do with the Lord's kingdom and so with the church. Here, then, the offspring born of factual information by shallow reasoning are just different kinds of ritual. The fact that Mizraim, Egypt, means secular learning, as demonstrated at verse 6 of this chapter, the fact that the Ludim, Anamim, Lechabim, and Nephtahim means the respective types of ritual which are merely secular, can be seen from the remarks directly above. Ritual that is merely secular is attributed to people who is shallow logic. To investigate spiritual and family topics and manufacture.
Manufacture.
Manufacture. A style of worship for themselves out of this, because the ritual involved in this type of worship develops out of logic and fact. It is called the secular. It has nothing spiritual or heavenly inside it because it comes from human selfhood. This was the source of Egyptian idols and of the magical arts.
Magical.
And of the magical arts, magic. Since this was the origin of those people's ritual, they completely rejected the rites of the ancient church. In fact, they felt disgust and loathing for those rites, and as indicated in Genesis, Exodus, because these are the things symbolized. Those people are said to have been fathered by Mizraim, or Egypt, that is, by secular knowledge. And because they had many different kinds of knowledge, the ritual that sprang from it also came to be of many different types. The general varieties are symbolized by the respective nations. The fact that the Ludim or Lydians Ludim or Lydians have such a meaning can be seen in Jeremiah. Egypt rises like a river, and like rivers, its waters churn. Mhm. Churn. Mhm. Waters churn. Churn. And it has said, I will go up, I will blanket the land, I will destroy the city and those living in it. Go up, horses, run mad, chariots, and let your mighty men march out. Push and put, as you grasp your shield, and Lydians, as you grasp as you bend your bow. The rivers of Egypt are different categories of information, false information. Going up and covering the land is using factual information as a means of entry into religious questions or matters of faith. Destroying the city is destroying true ideas. Such push and put are religious knowledge. Lydians, the subject here, are rituals that have emerged out of factual knowledge. Grasping and bending a bow is indulging in shallow logic. Indulging. Indulging in shallow logic. The Patrosim and Kasluhim means nations by these names, and they symbolize doctrinal positions regarding ritual, which come from the same origin and are themselves purely secular. Purely secular. This is evident from the statements just made and from the position of these nations in the sequence. For passages about the people of Pathros, see Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. The fact that from whom the Palestine came means the nation that grew out of this tradition, which in turn symbolizes the knowledge of concepts involved in faith and charity, can be seen in the word where the name comes up many times. The ancient church used the label of Philistine for all those who talked about faith and about the idea that salvation is found in faith and yet completely failed to live a life of faith. For this reason, Philistines, more than any others, were also described as uncircumcised, meaning that they lacked charity. For passages that refer to them as uncircumcised, see 1 Samuel and other places. These people, by nature, could not help turning religious knowledge into a matter of memorizing. Memorization. Memorization.
Memorization.
Memorization. Memorize and memorization. The knowledge of spiritual and heavenly realities and even the mysteries of faith become nothing more than objects of memory when the people who are adept at them have no love for others. Memorized details are dead objects to us unless we live according to them as a matter of conscience. When we do, then as soon as something becomes part of our memory, it also becomes part of our life. That is when it first becomes something in us that remains useful to us and our salvation after physical life ends. Neither secular nor religious knowledge means anything to us in the other life, even if we have learned all the secrets that have ever been revealed, unless it permits our life. Permeates.
Permeates.
Permeates. Permeates, like penetrate. Permeates. Permeates. Permeates, like penetrate. Our life. In the prophetic parts of the word, Philistines always symbolize this kind of people as they do in the narrative parts too. One example is Abraham's stay in the Philistines' land and the fact that he struck a pact with Abimelech, king of the Philistines, since the Philistines symbolized the concepts of faith and Abraham represented the heavenly aspects of faith. He stayed in the land and entered into a pact with them. Isaac, who represented the spiritual aspects of faith, did something similar. But Jacob did not because he represented the surface aspects of the church. Philistines in general symbolize the knowledge of religious concepts and in particular those who place faith and salvation in knowledge alone, which they turn into memorized information. This can be seen in Isaiah. Do not rejoice through and through Philistia, that the rod striking,
Striking.
mhm, that the rod striking you has been broken, because from the root of a snake a co- co- cockatrice will come out, and its fruit will be a fine fair snake. The root of a snake stands for facts, and the cockatrice.
Cockatrice.
Cockatrice. Cockatrice. Like basilisk.
Basilisk.
Basilisk. Maybe cockatrice. We can see picture. Cockatrice. It's like a snake. Cockatrice. Oh, it's like a bird. Okay. Maybe it's like bird, and this is cockatrice. Okay. hmm And the cockatrice for evil rising out of falsity based on those facts. The fruit that is a fly and fire snake means the deeds of those people. In the deeds are referred in the deeds are referred to as a flying fire snake because they result from cravings. In Joel, what are you to me, Tyre and Sidon, and all your borders of Philistia? Are you repaying me with retribution? I will very speedily bring your retribution back onto your own head, because my silver and my gold you have stolen, and my good, desirable things you have taken into your temples, and the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem you have sold to the children of the Javanites in order to make them go far away from their own border. The meaning of the Philistines and of the whole of Philistia, all its borders, is plain. The silver and gold mentioned mean spiritual and heavenly qualities of faith. Good, desirable things mean knowledge of those qualities. The taking of these items into the Philistines' temples means that they had that knowledge and preached it. But they sold the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem, which means that they had no love and no faith. Judah in the word is the heavenly side of faith, while Jerusalem is the spiritual side of it that develops out of the heavenly side, and these were removed far from their own borders. There are other passages in the prophets too, such as Amos, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Obadiah, Zephaniah, Psalms, for passages about the people of Captor, see Deuteronomy, Jeremiah, Amos. The fact that they came from the Kasluhim means that with them religious knowledge exists in the form of facts, as the statements just made indicate. They are, they are not said to have been fathered by the offspring of Egypt, but to have come from them, because they do not do as those described above do. They are not the kind of people to invent new doctrines for themselves by reasoning fallaciously. Fallaciously.
Fallaciously.
Fallaciously. Fallaciously. It's like falsely. Reasoning fallaciously about spiritual and heavenly subjects on the basis of earthly knowledge. Instead, they learn religious concepts from some other source, and the reasons they have for learning and memorizing the information are no different than their reasons for learning about other subjects. None of the information matters to them aside from the fact that they know it, unless they can see it as a way to rise its high position and to other advantages. They, the study of religious concepts is so unlike and discipline in one of the earthly arts or sciences that the two share hardly any common ground. Are earthly arts or science maybe?
Sciences.
Sciences, yeah, sciences, yeah. Earthly arts or sciences. The two share hardly any common ground. This is why the Philistines are said not to have been born to the Kashluhim, but to have come from them, because this is what Philistines are like. They too inevitably pervert religious knowledge by sophistic reasoning about it and in the process create false doctrines for themselves. Inevitably. Mhm.
Inevitably.
Inevitably. Mhm. Inevitably. Pervert religious knowledge by sophistic reasoning about it and in the process create false doctrines for themselves. They too then are among those who are almost incapable of being reborn and receiving any urge to love their neighbor. Their hearts are uncircumcised and besides false assumptions. Assumptions?
Assumptions.
Assumptions. Mhm. Like supposition. Hypothesis. Hypothesis.
Hypothesis.
Hypothe. Hypothesis. 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 And assumptions. And consequently, the life of their intellect get in the way and prevent their rebirth. Mhm. Genesis 10:15. And Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth. Canaan here, as before, symbolizes outward worship that has no inner content. Sidon symbolizes a superficial knowledge of spiritual attributes, because this is the first knowledge acquired in the kind of outward worship being discussed here. Sidon is called Canaan firstborn. Heth symbolizes a superficial knowledge of heavenly attributes. The symbolism of Canaan as outward worship as that has no inner content has been demonstrated in an earlier discussion of Canaan. The outward display of worship that is called Canaan is the kind that Jews practiced before the Lord's coming and after it as well. They had an external form. They had an external form of devotion that they observed very strictly. Strictly.
Strictly.
Strictly and strictly. Strike, strictly. And strictly. Strictly. Like precisely. Rigidly.
Rigidly.
Rigidly. Strictly without observed very strictly. Strictly. Without realizing what his inner dimension was. In fact, they imagined their bodies alone were alive. They had absolutely no idea what the soul was, what faith was, what the Lord was, what spiritual or heavenly life was, or what life after death was. As a result, many of them in the Lord's time denied the resurrection, as Matthew, Mark, and Luke show. When we are such that we do not believe we live on after death, we also fail to believe that any inner dimension exists. Dimension.
Dimension.
Dimension. And in American. Dimension.
Dimension.
Dimension. Dimension. Dimension and dimension. We can say dimension exists whether spiritual or heavenly. People so spend their lives on mere self gratification, especially those mired in sordid, mired, mired, like stick, mired in sordid greed. Mhm.
Sordid.
Sordid greed. It's like disgusting, dirty greed. In sordid greed are like these two, because they devote their lives exclusively to their person and to worldly advantages. Advantages.
Advantages.
Advantages like benefit. And advantages. Nonetheless, they engage in worship one group attending synagogue, another go into church, and they observe traditional rites, some of them doing so very strictly. But since they do not believe in life after death, their worship cannot help being shallow, without any inner content, like a nutshell without the meat. Meat. hmm It's like beef of nut. Flesh of nut.
Meat.
Mm-hmm. Nutshell without the meat, or like a tree without fruit and even without leaves. This is what the outward devotions symbolized by Canon are like. All the other types of inward worship discussed above were types of worship that did contain inner levels. The symbolism of Sidon as a superficial knowledge of spiritual attributes can be seen from the fact that he is called Canaan's firstborn, since what is firstborn in every church is in an inner sense faith. Here, though, where there is no faith, since inner qualities are lacking, or it is nothing more than a superficial knowledge of spiritual attributes, which takes the place of faith. So it is the kind of knowledge the Jews had, not only a knowledge of the ritual involved in external worship, but a knowledge of other kinds of things that had to do with their worship as well. Doctrinal precepts being on one example. The fact that Sidon symbolizes these things can also be seen from the consideration that Tyre and Sidon were the farthest boundaries of Philistia. They even bordered on the sea. So Tyre symbolized deeper knowledge, and Sidon symbolized shallower knowledge, a deeper or shallower knowledge even of spiritual concepts, as the word also demonstrates in Jeremiah. Over the day that is coming to devastate all the Philistines, to cut down Tyre and Sidon, every survivor who helps, because Jehovah is devastating the Philistines, the remnant of the island of Capta. And the Philistines stand for a knowledge of the religious concepts involved in faith and charity. Tyre stands for further deep concepts, and Sidon for concepts of spiritual entities. In Joel, what are you to me, Tyre and Sidon, and to all your borders, you borders of Philistia, and all you borders of Philistia? Because my silver and my gold you have stolen, and my gold, desirable things, you have taken into your temples. Clearly, in this passage, Tyre and Sidon stand for knowledge and are called the borders of Philistia, since the silver and the gold, desirable things are points of knowledge. In Ezekiel, there you find the chiefs of the north, all of them and every Sidonian who have all gone down with the stabbed into the pit. When Pharaoh with all his horde is made to lie in the middle of the uncircumcised, along with those stabbed by the sword. The Sidonians stand for superficial knowledge, which in the absence of any deeper content is just a collection of facts. Absence.
Absence.
It's like lack. The absence of any deeper content is just a collection of facts, and what is why the Sidonians are mentioned at the same time as Pharaoh, meaning Egypt, which symbolizes facts. In Zechariah, Hamath too will border on it, as will Tyre and Sidon, since it was very wise. This is about Damascus, Tyre, and Sidon stand for knowledge. In Ezekiel, the inhabitants of Sidon and Arvad were your rovers, your sages. Tyre were within you, they were rovers. It's like rove. No.
Rowers.
Rovers, like roving man. Mhm. Rovers, your sages. It's like wise men, I think. Yeah,
Sages.
wise man. They were your captains. Captains.
Captains.
Captains. Your captains. Like captains. Tyre stand for rather deep knowledge, so its sages are called the captains. Captains. And the Sidon stands for rather superficial knowledge, so its people are called rovers, since this is the relation of deeper knowledge to shallower. In Isaiah, the inhabitants of the island, the trade of Sidon crossing the sea are silent. They have filled you up, but the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river, its produce came on many waters, and it was the merchandise of the nations. Blush, Sidon, since the sea, the stronghold of the sea, spoke, saying, I was not in labor, and did not give birth, and did not bring up young men, raise young women. Sidon stands for shallower knowledge that has nothing deeper inside it. Because it has nothing inside, it is called the seed of Sihor. The harvest of the river is produce the merchandise of the nations, and also the sea, the stronghold of the sea, and something that does not labor or give birth. The literal meaning of these details could never be grasped, but on an inner level, their meaning is quite obvious, as it is with all other passages in the prophets. Because Sidon symbolizes superficial knowledge, it is also called the periphery of Israel, the spiritual church in Ezekiel, since superficial knowledge acts as a surrounding border. It was explained in the last section that Sidon is called Canaan's firstborn because this knowledge is the first acquired in the kind of outward worship devoid of inner content being discussed here. The fact that Heth symbolizes a superficial knowledge of heavenly attributes follows logically. The prophets customarily Customer, like usual.
customarily,
Customarily, yeah. Normally, customarily. Normally, commonly, habitually.
habitually,
Habitually. Customarily link spiritual and heavenly ideas where they speak of spiritual properties. They also speak of heavenly ones. The one set comes from the other, so a certain perfection is missing unless they are joined. Further purpose is to bring an image of the heavenly marriage into each and every part of the world. These considerations, not to mention other illustrative passages in the word, show that Sidon symbolizes a shallow knowledge of spiritual qualities, while Heth symbolizes a shallow knowledge of heavenly ones. They symbolize this knowledge in both senses, both with and without deep knowledge. In addition, they stand simply for superficial knowledge. Spiritual entities, as noted many times before, are aspects of faith, and heavenly entities are aspects of love. Again, spiritual traits belong to the intellect, heavenly ones to the will. The symbolism of Heth as shallow knowledge devoid of deeper knowledge can be seen in Ezekiel. This is what the Lord Jehovah has said to Jerusalem, your trading and your birth origins belong to the land of Canaan. Your father is an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. You are the daughter of your mother, who showed disgust for her man and her children, and the sister of your sisters, who showed disgust for their husbands and their children. Your mother is a Hittite and your father an Amorite. In this passage, outward worship without inward is Canaan, showing disgust for their husbands and children is spurning things that are good and true, which is why their mother is called a Hittite, spurning things.
spurning,
Spurning like reject, push away, spurning. Hath in the word is also taken to stand for a relatively superficial knowledge of heavenly attributes in a good sense. Almost all the names of lands, cities, nations, and individuals do have a good sense for the reason given earlier. This symbolism of health will be dealt with later by the Lord's divine mercy. Spiritual concepts are those that relate to faith and so to doctrine, but heavenly concepts relate to love and so to life. Hello, everybody. Who wants to read next section, next verse, Genesis 10, 16, 17, 18. Okay, nobody wants to read. I'll continue. Genesis 10:16. And the Jebusite and Amorite and Girgashite and Hivite and Arkite and Sinite and Arvadite and Zemarite and Hamathite, and after that the clans of Canaanites scattered. They Jebusite, Amorite, Girgashite, Hivite, Arkite, Sinite, Arvadite, Zemarite, and Harmathite were individual nations that also symbolize individual idolatries of different sorts. And after that, the clans of the Canaanites scattered. Means that all other types of idolatrous worship come from them. The Jebusite, Amorite, Girgashite, Hivite, Archite, Sinite, Arvadite, Zemarite, Harmathite were individual nations that also symbolize individual idolatries of different sorts. The fact that those nations symbolize idolatries is evident from many places in the world because they were inhabitants of the land of Canaan who were rejected on account of their idolatries, and of whom a portion was eradicated. But in the word's inner sense, they do not symbolize the nations but the idolatries themselves. In general, they symbolize idolatry wherever it exists. The specific reference is to idolatry among the Jews for that time. There are people who view worship as consisting solely in outward acts, who flatly,
Flatly.
like categorically, flatly, who flatly refuse to hear about inward elements and reject the very idea when they are taught about it. Such people are strongly drawn to all these types of idolatry, as is strikingly, strikingly, amazingly, like, as is strikingly clear from the Old Testament Jews. Only in internal worship is there a bond that can hold us back from idolatry. When it breaks, there is nothing left to stop us. Idolatry, however, comes not only in shallow forms but in deeper forms as well. Superficial types of idolatry attract those practicing in outward worship devoid of inner devotion. The deeper forms of idolatry attract those practicing an outward worship in which the inner depths are, foul, 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 like foul, foul language, yeah, foul, unclean, filthy. The inner depths are foul. Both kinds are equally symbolized by these nations. Inward idolatries are simply so many falsities and impure desires that we love and adulate. We love and adulate. What is this?
Adulate.
Adulate. Adulate, like flatter. Flattering. Adulate. We love and adulate, which means that they stand in the place of the gods and idols that existed among non-Jewish nations. But explaining exactly which falsities and cravings are adulated by the various people symbolized by these nations, the Jebusite, Amorite, Girgashite, Hivite, Archite, Sinite, Arvadite, Zemarite, and Hemathite, would take too long here, but the Lord's divine mercy it will be told in the individual places where their names come up. The meaning on after that the clans of the Canaanites scattered as the fact that all other types of idolatrous worship come from them is evident without explanation. Well, wants to read next verse, Genesis 10:19.
Genesis. That is a YouTube channel I know with a nickname like that.
Genesis.
Yeah,
It's the
Genesis.
it is the first book of the Bible, book of Genesis, and it's about spiritual meaning of this book. It's the book of Swedenborg, Secrets of Heaven.
Okay. Okay. Are you really in religious? I mean, in some, I don't know, confession or yeah, why are you really interested in the religion literature? What's the reason?
I'm learning English from this book, and it's like a good book to learn English because words are repeating here. And this book is very smart and wise because Swedenborg has third highest IQ in history. His IQ is 206. He's a genius, and his books are very smart and wise. And I believe that if I will read smart and wise books, I will be more smart and wise. Actually, it's not like religious books. It's about mind and universe like this. It's about wisdom. It's about intelligence and intellect.
Okay, okay. Okay. And
Do you want to read?
who's an author? Author?
It's Emmanuel Swedenborg. You can see this book on the stream,
I
volume
see. Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
A lot of great people loved to read his books and learned from them.
Is he
His IQ,
Swedish?
yeah, he lived in he was from Sweden and he lived in England. He wrote his books in England and in Sweden. He was a
I see in the Wikipedia they saying that he was an inventor. So what's the thing he invented?
great scientist and biologist and in several disciplines, and he was a writer. He wrote a lot of books.
Yeah, and at the same time he is an inventor. And I really wonder what things he invented. Maybe you know.
Vintage. So, what's the word? I don't understand.
Invented. From the word
Invented.
inventor. Yep.
Winter.
Inventor.
Inventor. I don't know this word. Sorry. Maybe you can rephrase in other words.
Oh yeah, easily. If we're talking about, for example, Thomas Edison, right? And he was an inventor of a light bulb. So okay, muted. Good job. So yeah, and about Thomas Edison, like he creator, right? He is a creator of a light bulb. That means he invented this thing. Okay.
Invented.
So
Okay.
inventor and invented, like that is about this guy Swedenborg. I just found it out in the Wikipedia. So if you didn't know about his inventions, it's not a problem. It's okay. Like maybe you didn't be interested a lot. Yeah, in his biography. I don't know.
Okay, you can type Manuel Swedenborg IQ, and you can read about a level of his IQ. It's 206. Do you understand what that means? It means if you're able to understand and comprehend his books, it means that your IQ is more than 100. But who is chattering there?
Oh, I see 205. Mm-hmm. Okay. That is a lot of, a lot of suggestions about IQ of this guy, of the scientist, from like 165 to 210. So nobody knows exactly how much IQ this person had. So it's, I think, will be a secret for the whole history of humanity. Nobody, or maybe okay, whatever it is. Yeah, it's so high. IQ 200. Damn, I
Yeah.
think I have like maybe 120, maybe 125. Yeah, that means this guy was so smart. Goddamn smart.
Yeah, so you can understand if you will, if you read his books, you can understand that it is impossible to write these books without big knowledge like this, like about perception from God, like this. Because I use this term as God to talk about big things like the store of every information, because if we say God knows everything, and like if we receive information from God, we can be more smart and wise like this, because God is like a store of information. Mm, like this. You know, what about you? Do you want to read maybe this verse? And
Oh, I have a book to read anyway. So just check you another time just to see what's the progress, in the pronunciation and stuff. So I see, yeah, that's just keep it rolling and just keep it up, man. Keep it up, and it's gotta be fine. I'm sure. And in Wikipedia, unfortunately, there is no words about his inventions, like only the basics. I mean, like the words in general. Like he was a guy who had some labors about the metals and how to oh my god, improve it. I have no idea how to say. So, and only one thing that he really invented, and which is like correctly the Google saying, there is a book, Arcana. Excuse me, Arcana Celestia, True Christian Religion, Heaven and Hell. So, if I am just a writer, and for example, I wrote a book, so is it possible that people will call me an inventor? No, right. Okay, whatever. God damn. Yeah, Swedenborg, I'm so sorry that's interrupted you. Just keep it up. Yeah, keep going. Gotta be better. Day by
mhm.
day. Gotta be, succeed. Will be smarter than this guy. Your IQ will be more than 200, I hope.
But someone is chattering here. This guy is very noisy. Who is that?
Oh, I
Say,
muted them.
is it you who is chattering here? Because I'm reading the book, but you are screaming here. Can you hear me? Say, I. What are you talking about?
I muted that person.
Hmm.
Don't care.
Yeah, because it's like he listening TV. I think he's listening TV. Maybe
Probably.
it's. Mhm. Okay, I will continue.
Yeah, sure.
Genesis 10:19, and the border of the Canaanites reached from Sidon as you come to Gerar, as far as Gaza, as you come to Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. Here, as earlier, Sidon symbolizes superficial knowledge. Gera symbolizes information revealed about faith. Gaza symbolizes information revealed about charity. The border of the Canaanites reached from Sidon as you come to Gera. As far as Gaza symbolizes knowledge extending to include the truth and goodness in people who worship outwardly but not inwardly. As you come to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, as far as Lasha symbolizes the falsity and evil in which that knowledge ends. The symbolism of Sidon as superficial knowledge is established by the illustrations offered above at verse 15. The symbolism of Gera as information revealed about faith and so generally as faith itself can be seen from passages that mention Gera, such as Genesis 21, and later sections will deal with this symbolism of Gera, the Lord in His divine mercy willing. The symbolism of Gaza as information revealed about charity is established by two things. One is that where the word speaks of spiritual traits, it also speaks of heavenly traits in connection with them. In other words, when it talks about matters of faith, it also talks about matters of charity. The other is from the word as well in places that mention Gaza. What is more, knowledge extends to include faith, reaching as far as charity, which is its most distant boundary. The border of the Canaanites reached from Sidon as you come to Gerar as far as Gaza symbolizes knowledge extending to include the truth and goodness in people who worship outwardly but not inwardly. This can be seen from the symbolism of Gera and Gaza. The boundaries of all knowledge having to do with worship, whether it is shallow worship or deep, reach that far because all worship comes from faith and charity. Any worship that does not come from them is not worship by idolatry. Since the subject here is Canaan, that is outward worship, and the things that develop out of it, it is the boundaries and extent not of worship, but of knowledge that are meant here. The fact that as you come to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zebaim, as far as Lasha, symbolizes the falsity and evil in which that knowledge ends.
ياه عقلتي لهذا درسهم تقرانا مسكين تيتشر تيتشر we are sorry
And this, yeah, and sin. Actually, it's English speaking channel. Speak English, please.
I wanna read
Be seen from. I'm reading, and if
teacher
be seen from the symbolism of those nations in the narrative and prophetic parts of the word. Falsity comes from two general sources. One is the cravings that constitute selfishness and materialism. The other is the religious and secular concepts yielded by what is flimsy reasoning. Who knows what is flimsy?
Flimsy.
Flimsy. It's like shaky,
Fragile.
fragile, flimsy. Reasoning. Falsity from these sources that tries to gain the upper hand over truth is symbolized by Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim. Anyone can see that falsity and the evils stemming from it are the ultimate bounds of outward worship that has nothing inside. This kind of worship contains only what is dead. Wherever the people who practice it turn, they fall into falsity. They have no inner voice to guide them in the path of truth or keep them on it. They have only an external drive that carries them off wherever craving and delusion lead. Delusion.
Delusion.
Delusion. Something that is falsely.
Delusion.
Delusion, like deception. The narrative and prophetic books of the word mention Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zebaim, Adma and Zebaim, so the specific symbolism of each will be told in the appropriate places with the Lord's divine mercy. Mhm. Who wants to read next? Genesis 10:20, maybe? Genesis 10:20.
I can read.
Go ahead.
Okay. Genesis 10:20. These are Ham's sons by their clans, by their tongues, in their lands, in their nations. Ham's sons symbolize the doctrinal views and the varieties of worship that developed out of our corrupt inward worship, which is Ham. By their clans, by their tongues, in their lands, in their nations means according to the mentality of each. Is specifically and generally by their clans means according to their standards of behavior, by their tongues means according to their ways of thinking, in their lands means in respect generally to their way of thinking, in their nations means in respect general generally to their behavioral standards. Hamsons symbolize the doctrinal views and the varieties of worship that developed out of corrupt inward worship, which is this can be seen from the symbolism of sons and doctrinal views, and from the symbolism of Ham as corrupt inward worship, a symbolism discussed previously. Okay, anyone can read. I think lots of background noise there.
Yeah, this noisy guy. I muted him because his
No, there is also background noise in my side. So yeah.
Mhm. Okay. The meaning of by their clans, by their tongues, in their lands, in their nations, as according to the mentality of each specifically and generally, was explained about verse 5, where the same words occur, although in a different order. The diverse set of Japheth's sons that from them the islands of the nations dispersed in their lands, each by its town, by their clans, and in their nations, which symbolized different types of outward worship that had deeper worship within. In that passage, then, the images having to do with doctrine came first, but here those having to do with behavior or with life come first. By their clans means according to their standards of behavior, by their tongues means according to their way of thinking, in their lands means in respect generally to their way of thinking, and in their nation means in respect generally to their behavioral standards. This is established by the symbolism of each clan, town, land, and nation in the word. For those meanings, see what was said about at verse 5. Genesis 10:21. Who wants to read? Nobody wants to read next verse. Okay, because I was reading a lot, and I think I will continue the reading tomorrow. I have to go. Goodbye.